Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and I'm the community manager here at Raise Devs. What are we doing here today? What is the Hacktoberfest Help Desk? For those of you who are new to the show, this is your place to get help with all of your Hacktoberfest questions this Hacktoberfest, as well as the Discord. And the other places where people are helping you with your Hacktoberfest questions. We are here live 3 times a day to get you the help you need to make successful contributions this October. How does that work? How do you get your problem solved? Well, you can drop them into the Twitch chat anytime, and we'll take time out of our show to answer those for you. But you can also submit your questions in advance to raise.dev/Oktoberfest, where we will get those to one of our wonderful guests who will review your question and then answer it here live on the show. When you submit a question, we let you know when your question is going to be answered. And if you can't make it to the show to see the answer, we send you the recording right after the show as well. Doesn't matter what kind of questions they are, whether they're big questions like how do I get started with open source, or very particular questions like I'm stuck on this error message, this issue, how do I use this library? We will find a way to answer that question for you. So this is the first of 3 shows today. We've got a very special guest joining me on the stage very soon. But before I get into that, I want to briefly tell you where to find out about the rest of the shows. Our shows are all up on twitch.tv, RaiseDev's schedule. That's the schedule through for the rest of the week. I will be updating the schedule with next week's shows at the end of Friday. We are, as I said, going all October. We've got amazing guests on every week. At the end of this show, I'll give you a little spoiler of what we've got coming up tomorrow and next week. So stick around for that. And then the final mention, shout out to the folks in the Hacktoberfest Discord who just asked me what Raise.dev is. Raise.dev is a service for you to level up your developer career. We are here to help you take the next step, whether that's your first developer job, your second developer job, a promotion, changing industry, anything like that. And how it works is that we match you with one of our expert coaches who will help you get the experience you need. We have some wonderful coaches from all kinds of industries, all kinds of backgrounds. They will work with you to set goals, and they'll pair program with you. They'll work on projects with you to get you the experience you need to get the job that you want or the promotion that you want. We are free whilst you're in early access, and you can sign up at raise.dev down below. And that's why we're here helping you this Hacktoberfest. We're all about helping developers level up, and Hacktoberfest is a great opportunity to do that. So I hope the person from the Hacktoberfest Discord was watching. Otherwise, I have to go repeat that to them in the Discord after this. So let me now bring on our wonderful guest for the day. It's going to be a super fun show. Just to give you an idea of how this will work. We're going to be going for about an hour. We're going to be talking about Flaki's dev career and the cool things that Flaki's working on. And then we're going to get into some really old, interesting code. I won't post too many spoilers, but Flaki's lined up something exciting for us that it's kind of become an accidental thing on this show where we review old code now. It's very cool. So please welcome Flaki to the stage.
Hello. Hello,
Would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers, Flaki?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, somebody pointed out Flaki Smoshensky on this. Well, Flaki is not my actual name, but pretty much.
I missed my opportunity. I've been practicing the pronunciation.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, we'll let you go again, like later.
Terrible.
But yeah. So my name is actually István Smoshensky, which is like the Hungarian version of Steven, basically. So it's nothing that spectacular.
Yeah.
And so but pretty much all the internet knows me by Flaki anyway.
Yeah.
And so I'm a JavaScript developer. I used to call myself a web developer and would get all these like pings from LinkedIn to do Java. And I was like, no, JavaScript is not really helping you there either. Anyway, so I started as like a web developer, JavaScript developer. I did I transitioned into like front-end trainings. Later on, I did like a bunch of like DevRel. I've been working at Mozilla doing like community and DevRel work in the past couple of years, and now I'm on to like ever since like this spring I'm on to new interesting frontiers. So been doing a bunch of that.
And we're definitely going to be talking about that and what you've been up to and how that's worked. It's interesting you mentioned Mozilla. I think that's how we met, and also on the topic of like everyone on the internet knowing you as by Flaki. I remember the first time I saw you use István somewhere. I think it was on a conference schedule. You were talking, I think.
Oh, could
and
be.
I remember like not realizing it was you because I'd met you as Flaki and only ever like spoken to you as Flaki, and then like went to that talk and was like,
"Who's that guy?"
Oh, yeah.
That happens more often than not.
I can imagine. Just one note for the viewers that I forgot at the beginning. links and URLs and things you want to share and post about in the chat are super welcome. However, because the internet is a terrible place and there's a bit of a random spam problem on Twitch at the moment, we have a very overtuned moderation bot. So if you want to post a link or a URL to something, you're very welcome to do so. But what you need to do is drop me a mention at Raise Devs. And just say like, can I post a link, please? And then I will add you to the allow list so that our bot doesn't ban you. Currently, Matt, who's just joined, is the record holder for like most timeouts by our mod bot. Don't be Matt. I had to make Matt a VIP and stop him getting banned. So if you want to share something, just let us know. And otherwise, you can ask questions in chat anytime, and we'll try and get through and answer those. So,
if any of you have been to the Gemstem Conf like just a couple days ago, you will know why this thing is in place.
Yeah, actually, it happened yesterday where like we had been for a big dancing chat of me adding someone so they could post a link, and it was all looking very silly. And then like 10 minutes later, we had 5 spam bots join at once who just got auto banned. I was like, that's why we do this.
Yep.
There you go. Matt's got himself banned again. Well done, Matt. Excellent. It's only a short ban, just a little timeout in the corner. Anyway, so let's kick off the show. So Flaki, I want to start with kind of like your developer career, because you've done loads of wonderful and wacky web things. And I remember like, I think there's at one point where I was in the Mozilla office in London ahead of a Mozfest, and you rocked up just like with a bag of hardware devices and like JavaScript internet things. Tell us a little bit about like, I guess like your developer passions and where this all started.
Jesus, I'm not prepared. I should have some of my tiny like play gadgets with me so I could like show off or stuff. Like I think I like you'll have to throw up a break screen. I'll bring all my cards and shit. Like but yeah. I mean, like this is something that's like very like me in terms of my dev career, is that I'm just super ADHD on this kind of stuff, and like I want to play with everything, and then like I have all these half finished projects. When Joe was like, "Hey Flaki, like, do you have any projects that you want to show us through?" And like that you're super like super like into and like you're really proud of, and I was like, this scrapyard, like calling through my GitHub, this scrapyard of all this like experimental projects that are really cool, but like are really not something to show off as like, hey, this you should follow this like experimental like transcoder and a service worker for an image, and that's like I'm really proud of that project, but like nobody should be taking anything off of it. And so that's pretty much me. It's like I've been playing with like hardware, like I have like a experimental compiler that compiles JavaScript into Arduino code, so you can write something like that will run in a browser and then JavaScript, and then it will run on like an Arduino with like a tiny screen and some buttons attached, and like weird and wacky projects like that. It's like what I go by mostly.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so you got into, like I said, I've seen you do a lot of hardware stuff, which is, I mean, not the traditional realm of web technologies. I know there's like things like the Tessel and that kind of stuff now, and like cross compilation is certainly an interesting topic. Like,
oh yeah,
how do you how did that seems like a million miles away from web technologies?
Yeah, so that's funny because that's pretty much how my hardware stuff started with a Tessel. Like it was like something like a Kickstarter-ish project, and like I backed it, and then my Tessel arrived, and it was like, this is super cool. This is making it so much more accessible than like fiddling with Arduino code. And I actually had some background in like C from university, so I know my way around like low level code, and like I have the understanding of low level code, but like writing low level stuff in Arduino and like C++ is like still like not the easiest thing on earth, especially when you have to like manually like set up bit fields if you want like anything like a graphics on screen and like all the limitations. So I was like, hey, like we should make computers help with this stuff. And that's pretty much where Tessel itself comes from. Like it actually like transpiles like JavaScript to Lua, because they managed to get Lua working on like that chipset. And later on, like we had like a good bunch of like other stuff.
I see Tessel's also doing Rust as well now. That's interesting.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of other like projects that kind of brought like JavaScript on this low level, super like limited hardware. But back then, that was like the only way. It's like they cross compiled to Lua, and like Lua was kind of like JavaScript, so they were
Yeah.
like we can make it work, and it's always an uphill battle when you're cross
Right.
compiling. Like somebody's gonna show up with like this weird npm package that doesn't
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So that's how I got into hardware in the first place. Like that
Yeah.
is a million years ago, and it kind of went from there. Like kind of, and as you say, like I play with a lot of like like I kind like I have my consultancy in
Yeah.
Estonia,
Mhm.
and I kind of call it myself like somebody who is always like on the cutting edge of JavaScript. So I consult
Right.
on like WebAssembly and like WebXR stuff and service
Right.
workers when like workers were like in a proposal phase. I
Yeah.
was like doing a lot of work around like this is super cool
Yeah.
stuff like
For folks who
teaching.
haven't had a chance to play with service workers yet, do you want to explain what they are and how they work?
Oh yeah, so this ever since like 1,000 years ago, like what you did when you open it or when you wanted to open a web page is then your browser would like, hey, there's this URL. I'm
Mhm.
gonna contact this remote server,
Mhm.
and if the remote server has these files that I need, then I'm going to like generate a web page from the files that the remote server is going to send me over the network, and like as like the like the kind of separation between like web applications or web pages and like actual applications on your computer,
Yeah.
like as that separation kind of became thinner and thinner, people are like, hey, why can't we just like tell the browser that whatever we download, like
Mhm.
just store it and like
Mhm.
reuse it when the user doesn't have any connection. And there were
Right.
like some previous attempts for that to make that like work. There was this declarative API that you would just
Mhm.
list off all the files that you wanted to store, and the browser would
Mhm.
store it. But that was riddled with food guns, and like like it was very brittle, very easy to break. So some engineers came up with this idea: how about you like we give you more power, and
Mhm.
like this whole caching process, this whole hey, save this thing for offline,
Right.
like make that easier. So this is like a JavaScript API, and you could think about it as basically putting a mini server into
Yeah.
the browser. So you basically write
Okay, that's
like a proxy server, if you know, if you all know what it means,
yeah.
in between your web page or your web browser and the internet. And
Mhm.
like this proxy server will basically, what it will do, you write it in JavaScript, and there's like some APIs that you can use that runs in the background. And oh, I detected that there is no network connection, so I'm gonna serve some pages that I have cached from previously. And when
Mhm.
there is internet connection, it's like, oh, these are the rules by which I'm going to update all these like assets that I have saved on my machine. It's a
Mhm.
super powerful API, and it's super interesting. It can make super interesting things
Yeah.
happen. Like that was the project I was mentioning. That would be, if your browser doesn't support, for example, like a one of the new fancy image formats that are no like kind of hype on the web,
Mhm.
you could write like a sufficiently complex JavaScript code, but you would only download that JavaScript code once, so it's
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
That would basically do a conversion, like would
Oh,
download
interesting.
from the
Yeah.
web like this highly compressed image format, and
Yeah.
then would do the conversion, like convert it to like
Right.
JPEG, and
And
then
serve
would
it
cache it in
dynamically.
JPEG, and then would serve it back to the browser. Or the browser wouldn't know, because the browser
Right.
would know that it requested like an image with like a WebP extension, but
Yeah.
like the image that arrived had the headers that it's a JPEG image. So it would
Yeah.
just parse it as a JPEG image. And then you transparently made it work in a
Yeah.
browser that would support this API, but not support like this fancy like
Yeah.
image format. So it is really super powerful. And so that's kind of what I did. I was trying to sell people on these like new
Yeah.
technologies that was like really like hard to get into, or
Yeah.
like kind of a lot of companies were like, oh, that's like super far off, like why would we
Right.
need this?
Yeah, so I guess that's like an interesting thing with any new web technology. And I actually was, this kind of came up in a conversation yesterday where I feel like for as long as I've been doing web stuff, and like I am I'm a bad web developer, folks. But as long as I've been doing web stuff, I've always like had this kind of background thing in my mind whenever I see something new that like, oh, that looks really cool, but I can't use it because of browser compatibilities. Like, is that with like these like cutting edge things that you work on? Is that still a concern in 2020? Like, how fast do these things get adopted? Like, I don't know what the life cycle is like now.
It's in a way, it's a super funny thing. It's
Yeah.
now kind of like a double-edged sword,
Right.
in which it became a problem in a different way. And
Right.
like, there is a lot of websites today.
Right.
Like looking at you, like
There's too many
Slack,
websites. Yeah.
looking at you Slack, or even
Yeah.
like StreamYard, or many of the tools that we are using is
Yeah.
like, oops, sorry, this fancy API that we are using is actually only works in like Chrome.
Oh my
So
god.
we'll provide you like a 90% experience, but especially around like voice and video calls,
Yeah.
like we have a standard, but like yet like Microsoft like Messenger, or like Facebook Messenger,
Yeah.
Twitch, not Twitch, Slack, or
Right. Right. Right.
StreamYard, all of these stuff is like, yeah, no, if you want to voice chat, please install Chrome. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the thing, is like, even if you pronounce, they are actually coming back. Like, this is actually a good segue into Firefox OS. I'll
Yes.
tell you
Yeah.
later. But that's kind of like, you realize that just because you implement it, and just because you pronounced it as a
Right.
standard, it doesn't make it a
Yeah.
standard. And then that's, all these kind of issues you kind of have to deal with.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very much a problem, but in different like scales and different weights. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of like issues coming out of that, especially from, kind of monopolistic or like super popular platform that
Yeah.
kind of force you into like using a certain browser, or using
Right.
like some service, just because it doesn't work in like any other system.
Yes. Yeah, which is very true. So, like you mentioned, StreamYard, that's the browser-based tool that we're currently using to stream to you right now. I'm a Firefox user. I have Firefox everywhere, and today I'm currently running Chrome so that I can stream. And that's a frustration where I have to send instructions out to people being like, hey, please install Chrome for this call. So yeah, as you said, that's a great segue into, I guess, what we want, the main thing we wanted to cover today. So you've brought some old code for us to look at today, which I feel like is not just like your old code, but it's also in itself almost a historical artifact given where this platform ended up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? And you mentioned Firefox OS already, so I guess people know what we're talking about. But do you want to tell us
Yeah, absolutely. So when Joe said, "Hey, Flaki, like here are the things that we could do," and I saw this,
about
like, oh, this sounds like a super cool thing. It's like going back in time and like unearthing this like super old artifact. And so, full disclaimer, I actually
yeah,
haven't done anything on this repo except for checking it out. I was like, I'm gonna keep this authentic. I'm really curious what happens in there. I'm gonna look it up. I have somewhere like a tweet at least that shows the image like from a couple years ago. Let me
oh,
just
I
post
think
that
you sent me that as well.
from so from wait, no, that's actually Twitter.
Is this the award one?
Jack and Fox. Yeah. So it had like a Twitter account, and that one has a
Oh,
tweet.
I'm typing on the wrong keyboard again. Oh crap.
Oh, that's, I know exactly that kind of stuff. All right. So let me just post this into the chat. So this is how it looked like. It's also
Yeah.
Hungarian, so sorry about that. uh,
Let
so
me
this
grab
is
that tweet and put it on the screen.
yeah. So this is how it looked like.
Yeah.
It was an app. It was a web application for Foursquare. So if you
Right.
never heard of Foursquare, that's like the application that lets you check into places
Mm.
where you're visiting, and like share information and tips about the best coffee in town, best pasta, this kind of stuff. And uh, oh, there is Alex going to complain about inviting just any random people like Flaki in here.
That's all right. I've given him I've given him what he needs.
Yeah, so there was this application back in the days it was called
Yeah.
Foursquare. Now they actually have a separate app for checking in and a separate app
Right.
for like recommendations.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much it. And the problem is they only existed like as a native app. And so like here comes Mozilla comes up with this like super fancy idea of an operating system for mobile phones that is not Android or not iOS. And that works completely, like everything you see on the phone is based on web pages. Like back technologies, you can write applications using HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And they kind of aimed this at like the low end of the market.
Right.
And and so they aimed this at the low end of the market, kind of. But like the real aim was like, hey, anybody can develop applications. That was like the whole idea. I actually like again, I didn't prepare. I have a couple. I found a couple of these phones. Like
that's why I wanted
as I was moving. Like I should bring them over. So but like
what I'm showing at the moment, folks, Flaki, as said, like Firefox was aimed at kind of like the low end of the market, and so there's like the original phones, the Geeks phones. There was this phone, the Geeks phone Keon, which 2013. Like this phone. If you were doing Firefox OS, like this phone was everywhere. Like I have one of these somewhere that I think was given to me at a hackathon because I wrote a Firefox OS app. And like you look at the specs today, and it's like a single core, 1 gigahertz, 512 megabytes of RAM, and like this thing, like you could buy it new for like $50 or something. It was cheap. And like the operating system itself, like I said, is basically like apps were just web pages, right? Like it was.
Well, you could see the RAM on this phone is 512 megabytes.
Yeah,
like that's like half a gigabyte of memory, and you had to fit, like, imagine all the memes about how browsers are eating like 10 gigabytes of memory these days. Like imagine fitting a phone, a browser engine onto this phone that would do everything from like phone calls and everything like that. So that was the promise of Firefox OS. And all of that you could do like using these like HTML and JavaScript technologies. So service workers didn't exist back at that time. So they had to come up with a way to like kind of package up your applications and like run them locally. I think that was one of the issues with the operating system. Like if somebody like kind of brought back Firefox OS today, like that would be something that you could do much easier, much more properly, I would say. There were even like later on ideas to how to do that, like in better
so
ways.
how did they do it? I guess they had some like Firefox OS only APIs that you
that's pretty much it. Is how you did it is like you packaged it up into a zip file, and then they did some signatures. They were kind of also like, you know, like fascinated by this App Store model, and then they were trying to make that happen there. The thing I refer to, and I think that was like practically the end of Firefox, or the demise of Firefox OS, is that kind of how everything on the phone, I mean, everything that is on a web page, like that kind of works, you know, like you can even like grab the web camera and like stuff like that. But like, how do you make a phone call? How do you write an SMS? How do you like do all these, like, how do you have a keyboard? Like, you know, like the keyboard on Firefox OS was actually like a web page, an iframe that interacted with the operating system, because everything in the operating system was a web page and an iframe. And so they were.
Sorry, it's kind of funny to think about. Like in some ways, they were just a little bit too early, because now like Google have added most of these standards to support like Chrome OS and Pixel devices and whatever.
That's what I'm saying, is like a lot of those ideas has been fleshed out in the past year. So it's really like they were just like super early, like they were ahead of their time, a lot of the ways. And they also like they were also just a small scruffy company that kind of couldn't keep up with all the big companies out there. But yeah, so the way they solved it is they kind of added this like fancy APIs that they then try to standardize. They're like, hey, we're gonna create this like radio interface layer API so you can make phone calls and send SMS, and then we're gonna make it a standard. But obviously nobody was really interested in making them a standard, because nobody was interested in making like a phone like in their web like browsers. And so this is kind of where we get back, is like, just because you declare and like propose something for standardization, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Even if it is like, if it's some way push it through standardization, it doesn't mean it's going to end up as a standard implemented.
adopt it.
implemented actually in browsers.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of the times, like a lot of things that happen as de facto standards like
Yeah.
just end up being like brought onto actual standards, because that's just how
Right.
things work. So we might as well make a lot of people don't know this, but like we used to have like CSS like browser vendor prefixes that were
I
like,
remember
oh,
that very,
this
very
is
keenly.
this is really bad. This is a really bad practice. But what we ended up is we actually ended up standardizing. Like there is a standard for browser vendor prefixes. So they are now standardized just because compatibility was like a nightmare. And so
Yeah.
what they did is like Firefox implements dash dash WebKit like browser prefixes because that's just how they're used on the web. And like it's better to not have your web page not break than like stick to like what they used to mean. So
Right.
this is super weird, but that's kind of where Firefox OS came out.
Yeah.
That's how like, this whole application kind of started. Is like I was like, they have applications, they have no plan, they didn't have like a web page that you could check into places. So I was like, but they did have an API, and I was like, okay, so that sounds like it shouldn't be too hard. And like every time you say it shouldn't be too hard, that's like a famous
You're in
last
trouble.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, it shouldn't be too hard to like hack together like an application for Firefox OS that could do this for you. And then
Do you want to show it? Should we get into it?
yeah, absolutely. So let me. All right. So oops, I forgot to actually open this. Should I screen share?
Are we? Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Are we doing the Franken connection to your dev machine now? Is that what's going to?
Yeah, that is going to happen.
Streaming,
Okay.
folks. It's all just jank. I've got machines connected to machines and all kinds of weird stuff.
Oh yeah.
Whenever I want to put a link on the screen that Flaki has sent me, I have to send it to myself in Slack from a different machine to bring it up.
All right, so I should be able to share screen here now.
Yeah.
And select my.
Can I add that camera? We had a request from Alex to see your plushies. Can I add that camera?
Yeah. So this is the problem is I didn't get into that. You know what? We should do a break, and I should shift around my setup, and then I'll show you some stuff.
Let's do the code, and then we'll take a brief break and do.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're gonna go into Atom because that's the only thing I can share from this machine. So you should see it there.
God, Adam, that in itself is a throwback.
Yeah, I just never made the jump for anything on this machine. So yeah, so there you have it. I'm looking at it at the same time that you're looking at it. If I had like a bit more time, I really should have tried to get it working on some of the Firefox OS machines so I could show y'all. So the trick about this is like there are two ways to do a Firefox OS application. Mm-hmm. One is to package it up, and then one is to actually host it off a server and just create a manifest. And you are actually seeing that manifest right here. Mm-hmm. And this actually ended up being standardized. This is how you do installable web apps these days.
Nice.
So whatever you see here, that's not too bad actually. So this is a manifest.web app file. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's a bit too small. I don't think I can resize the UI.
No, it looks fine. I mean, on my display, it looks great.
All right.
Chat is having issues seeing, let us know. But I think this is a good size.
Yeah, so there are two ways to do this, to make this happen. Is like one is you like kind of package this up, and this is what it is like kind of it's packaged up, and then you say, hey, here's the web page that you open when you want to launch this application, and then you're like, hey, these are the icons that we are going to use. I wonder what are these icons actually? What are these images?
Foursquare icon.
I hope not. Oh, that's super small. Oh, I actually did.
Yeah.
Ah, kind of.
You made a little logo for it. Nice.
Yeah, I did. It got the whole my minimal Photoshop knowledge treatment. And yeah, like offer, that's pretty much the same. Like there's a version. And I think the interesting part is this part, is the permissions part. Is that you had to tell it, hey, let this application use geolocation and storage. And there is actually the small descriptions that says, hey, marking out the user location. If you want to check into somewhere, you want to have, this was actually the more, I actually have a Twitter thread on this from recently. I'll
This is
post
like
that
a
later.
really great model of like requesting permissions. Like having it as a description for why you need it is like
Oh yeah,
so
exactly.
advanced in 2013 than like the Android and iOS app stores are now.
Yeah, catching up to this whole notion
Yeah,
of like telling your users what do you need this shit for.
yeah,
Yeah, also like storage is like, because of the limited like the storage of these applications, like it's kind of important that you tell them, hey, we kind of want access to, we want to store data on this phone. So and so this API almost verbatim, like you can actually use this like 100%, like to install any web page, not just like packaged up web pages, but you can just point it to a URL. And like modern browsers, what they do these days is they actually have like these hints. Does your application, what you would do in the application, let me see if that actually was in here in the index HTML. Shortcut icons, style sheets. I don't see the manifest link, but what you do these days actually is you link your manifest in your, it links to the app cache, but doesn't to the actual manifest. So what you would do is you would have like a meta tag or like a link tag that links to when somebody opens your web page in a browser, it links to this manifest file. And then the browser would know, it links to this manifest. So this app can be installed to your home screen.
Right. So I guess
but that
to link this back to like what we'd refer to and talk about these nowadays, this is like
Yeah.
you'd use these to when you're building like a PWA, like a progressive
Yes,
web app.
yes, exactly. So a progressive web app, a PWA, would use this as a hint to tell the browser, hey, you can install this application onto the home page. But that doesn't tell the browser anything about, hey, but will this work offline? And that's kind of like a thing that, PWAs like mandate, is that your application should be usable without network connection. Like it should show something, and so the only way to do this these days is to have a service worker. So browsers have these kind of hints that they take away from web pages today. That is like, hey, like, oh, this web page that you just opened in the browser links to a manifest file, so I know you can install it to the home page. There's also like a service worker script embedded in the web page you just opened. Again, this didn't exist at this point, but you would have like a script linked and instantiated a service worker script in your document. And so the browser would like have this hint of like, oh, it has a service worker, so it installs a service worker, and then the service worker would go ahead and would cache the assets that you told it to do so. And so there are all these hints coming together in the browser, and the browser says, there's also like some, if you visited this browser, this web page more than once, and then Chrome or like any other like mobile browser would say, hey, you can install this web page to your web app. You've been kind of coming back to this web page a few times, and like, you've been opening up this web page quite a few times. It actually works offline. It has like a fancy icon you could add to your home screen, and then just pops up a window that tells you, hey, you can install this app to the home screen. Like, how about that? And then you are like, oh, you're right. Gosh, I actually do use this twitter.com quite a lot. So maybe I should.
I would feel so ashamed if my browser told me I'm spending so much time on Twitter, I should just install it.
But yeah, see, and then you would be able to like access a bunch of other functionality, like, notifications and stuff like that. Whereas like, all of these APIs kind of got bastardized when, like people would have to go on stage and tell people that notifications are like a nightmare, and like how every website and their dogs are asking you to enable notifications, and you're like, I don't care about your notifications. And so but that was kind of the initial idea, is like, hey, there are all these hints that you're using this app a lot, using this web page a lot, so giving you the user like easier access to it.
That's awesome. So we mentioned earlier that obviously like service workers didn't exist then, and it was like native APIs for it. Do you use any of them in this app? Those we can see, I guess, like what the
no.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so what I use here is actually linked up here in the manifest.app cache. And if you actually like do some reading on app cache, oh wait, that's not manifest.app cache. You can actually read about like that there is like, if you go back sufficiently long enough, app cache is hailed as like this fancy new technology that allows you, even and this is the thing about like that it became more prominent on uh, on service worker messaging,
Mm,
but and wasn't that prominent on app cache. But the messaging was also that you use this to offline your web
right.
app to make it offline capable, but actually it helps making your app faster as well.
Right, because you can
And
cache the things
so
that you were using.
yeah, you can declare what things need to be accessed, and the browser
Mhm.
can cache it for you. Now obviously if you manage to set up cache on and caching headers on your web page like properly, then you can already do that without an app cache.
Mhm.
But that was kind of like, hey, you can also like set this up front, and this is where service workers become really interesting. Is
Mhm.
when your browser installs the service worker can choose to pre-cache some resources. And
Right.
so it would download while you are like reading the homepage of the website, and then click, and then would be instantly transported with all the images already loaded on the second page of the website. So that's
Mhm.
kind of like, but it's not easy to predict. Like we have
Right.
all these predictions like built into the web pages and preload meta tags and all of that today. But like the easiest way to as with ever is to cater for all use cases, make the developer able to change these use cases. And so that's kind of where this whole thing breaks down. So you see there's a
Yeah.
lot of files in here, and there's some declaration of what you load and what you not load.
Right.
And
That
the
that
famous.
fallback heading is interesting. So that's
I'm
literally just
sorry.
like there was a field there like that just said fallback, and I'm guessing that's just like, hey, everything else has failed, deliver something. It was right at the
Yeah.
bottom, I think. Um, yeah, that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that basically says if you can't load anything from
yeah.
the network,
Send them
just show
something.
this page. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that kind of where all this breaks down is if you know okay, so I have a file
Hmm.
that tells the browser that if it doesn't have internet connection, it should download these cached files, and then should just use that. And
Right.
the question comes here, is the big question of computer science is like, the two big questions is like naming things and caching validation.
Which we covered with Floor the other day, but yeah, yeah. And then
And
caching
like,
mode. Okay.
and this is crashing validation. Like,
Yeah.
how do you change the assets? How do you know the local assets has changed? What happens if like your browser kind of tries to download some new version of this cache manifest, and like some junk remains on your machine? And
Right. Right.
like, it was just a total nightmare to kind of get right. And like, this is a small app. Like, this was a really like a basic application, and you
Mhm.
see there's a lot of files in there
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so imagine having like a giant app that like would have a
Like trying
lot
to
of,
make Slack work on Firefox.
yeah, like a lot of dynamic content and shit like that. It
Yeah.
would be it was a total like nightmare. So eventually, like, yeah, like the end result was like makes cache invalidation super rock solid. So service workers have like check like for new versions, and like no matter what are the cache headers, like you have to check and update the service worker for like a day.
Mhm.
Because like there are talks on this. There is a super amazing talk on this from JSConf.eu a couple of years ago
Mhm.
that talks about a zombie service worker. And the
Right.
talk, like just the presentation, is actually, the visuals of the talk is amazing.
Right.
And it talks about how what could happen when your client, like somewhere on the web browser, somebody downloads a service worker that just
Yeah.
logs them into the cache content and never updates ever. And like, just imagine the nightmare. That computer is basically never going to see the new versions of your website, because
Right.
it's
Right.
never
Right.
even going to try. And this is exactly the nightmare that was much easier to manifest itself with app cache
This one,
manifests.
the Alec by Alexander Pope,
Oh,
Outbreak.
Pope, yes.
Yeah. 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 Cool. I've just posted it in chat for folks who didn't watch.
Yeah, that's it's an amazing talk. It's super fun to watch. And so yeah, it actually happens even with like service workers if you are not too careful. But
Yeah.
but like, that was kind of a thing, is like, how do we make it super robust, not
Mhm.
just powerful but robust, so it's
Mhm.
harder to shoot yourself in the foot.
Interesting. Cool.
And I don't
It's
know.
like this is why I mentioned yesterday in the show while talking about the segment that one of the things that was going to be fun about reviewing this app is like, yeah, getting that kind of history and journey of how like the standards have evolved between like this wild attempt at making an entirely browser based phone and like now 2020 web technology. So actually that kind of leads me on to like, what does the JavaScript look like in this?
Ooh,
Because obviously like
ooh.
so much has happened in JavaScript land since Firefox OS, and particularly this app was what 2008,
Wait.
2013.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, this was
require
what?
JS already is like
Yeah, I was like, holy shit. Okay, wait. Let me check in Fox LL. So that one says the files are. Oh no, it only says wait. When are they updated? Oh, Jesus.
are you on like the wrong commit? Did you break it last time you added to it?
What do you mean?
Oh, I was just asking what you were looking for.
Oh no. Just like I was like gonna see like what is the modified date in this file, just out of
Oh, I see.
curiosity. But I guess that's also in GitHub. Like,
On your GitHub it says 7 years ago.
yeah,
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 2013.
that sounds about right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so
25th of July 2013.
yeah, so let me see. All right, so we have what was that? Yeah, so we as I mentioned, we have a leaflet library.
Yeah,
So
that's maps,
So
right?
so that's basically pulling in maps, right? So I mean, obviously that would not work, like especially not in this version if you wouldn't have
Yeah,
like internet connection. I mean,
right.
so here's the thing what makes like Swarm or like Foursquare easy is like you want to check in into
Mhm,
a place. So
mhm.
that kind of implies that you want to communicate to the API that you were there. I mean, there are some fancy scenarios when you would want to check in and then communicate to the server, like
Yeah,
kind of like sync your check-ins to the server later. That was definitely not implemented in this app, but like just generally, like it was kind of an easy way around to say, hey, like we could just like keep this like online only. So kind of
mhm.
like cache everything, the application itself, but like
Yeah.
to check in, you kind of
You
need
need to be
like an
online,
yeah,
right?
you need to have an internet connection. And so that's like why it's fine that you for to see the map you kind of have to see the internet connection
Right.
as well. This one, oh wow, this I think this is like a promises
I
library.
was going to ask when I saw that. I was literally just writing a note to ask
i'm
about when.
i'm
Yeah,
100. Yeah, it's a promises implementation.
that's
So any
incredible.
anybody who grew up in like not 7 years ago on doing
With the
web
the
dev.
async, you got your async await, and back then you had to use
Yeah,
the library.
yeah.
Okay,
So
libraries.
for anyone, so promises are like a kind of a way to tell the browser to say, hey, do this operation, give me back this promise, this value, this JavaScript value, and I can listen to changes on this JavaScript value. So you can let me know when this operation has succeeded. And
Mhm.
kind of it's called a promise because you kind of expect it to succeed.
Right.
But you can also like there are callbacks, catchphrases, not catchphrases, catch callbacks, when you
Mhm.
can say if something goes wrong and you can't, deliver on your promise, like this
Yeah.
is let me know here.
Do another action. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this was basically a super early primitive for doing asynchronous operations,
Yeah.
but it was not part of JavaScript at all. So what
Yeah.
happened is everybody kept re-implementing whatever
Right.
like kind of way they
Yeah.
made these operations happen.
And this is like
If
quite a lot of files you're packaging with this app to
Oh
get this
yeah,
functionality,
oh
right? Like
yeah.
that's yeah.
So this would be like if you use like Node.js back in the day, you would like be
Right.
seeing all these callbacks back all around, and then people would be complaining about callback hells and then
Mhm.
promise hells and like, but basically, like this specification called Promises A plus was kind
Mhm.
of developed separately,
Mhm.
and there was there was this specification eventually that came together from all these different ways of doing things, of jQuery doing things, and what was it, blue prom something like blue something,
Okay. Bluebird, yes,
bluebird,
I do remember Bluebird.
like a promise all these promise libraries doing things slightly
Yeah.
differently, and they kind of like like created a promise specification. This is how every promise like library should operate, and then you
Mhm.
could have like extra things whatever, but like, this is like the baseline.
Mhm.
And when they standardized that, they actually moved that, and this happens a lot on the web. They moved that standardized, like it's how things work on the web now. So we might
Right.
as well get rid of this, like, hundreds of kilobytes of JavaScript
Yes.
dependency, and just like, put this straight into the browser. So
Yeah.
now you could just new promise and create a new promise in your
And
browser
this
and not
library
have to.
was last updated 5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. And so that was kind of the thing. From Flak, from SL Softworks. I'm looking for the thread I wrote up on geolocation just recently, so I can share that, because that's going to be, I think, the interesting part here. Oh yeah. I think this is it. Yeah.
Just a reminder, folks, while Flaki is looking for that, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat at any point. There can be questions about your Hacktoberfest contributions or what we're looking at now. You've got any questions about how Firefox best worked, how these standards evolved, JavaScript in general. I know someone in the Discord was talking about coming here to ask Flaki a TypeScript question. I don't know if that person arrived, but feel free to throw that in.
I mean, you can try, but like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I've been looking into TypeScript. Well, I'm digressing, but like just a small intermission. The thing I mentioned, that I created this thing where I would compile JavaScript to Arduino code.
Yeah.
Like C code is strongly typed, so you need to know the type of the variables. And so I was like kind of fiddling between TypeScript or Jesus, what's the other thing? The texture types on the JavaScript code. There's this library by Facebook.
Yeah.
I was just blanking on the name.
That's gonna annoy me. This is one of the worst things about being on stream. You things tip of the tongue.
But I basically spent a lot of time on it. I can't believe I can't remember the name. Flow. Yeah, Flow. So actually, I would use Flow to kind of determine my JavaScript types and then turn them into like C code. And so I was looking into TypeScript at that time, and now because Dino, the new like server side or JavaScript runtime, is using TypeScript heavily. So I keep coming back to it, but actually I haven't spent a lot of time on it.
Sorry, I completely distracted you. So we're talking about like the evolution of this as a standard, and now when JS is obviously like no longer maintained, because it doesn't need to be. So now JS is almost another example of that, right? Like you're using JS in here, and that's now being replaced by
we are still not there yet with require.js. So require.js is another thing that you would use to, and that again, like there would be a million ways to kind of do code separation and like composition in your JavaScript code base. And like, I'm pretty sure I have like a talk or blog post on this as well. Oh, by the way, if anybody wants, like, I have a blog post which is super old. Like I wrote it kind of when I transitioned from my old front-end job into like training. And it's called JavaScript Word Domination. And I would keep going back to the blog post, and I keep realizing, first of all, the world hasn't changed that lot. Like we keep seeing like JavaScript like move so fast, but a lot of these like problems are still there. And also people haven't changed that lot because it's a 17-page blog post I wrote for 2 days, 2 weeks. And somebody is complaining how it doesn't, address this kind of like one particular thing and this like the Python ecosystem. And I was like, seriously, it's a 17-page blog post. And
it will take 23 minutes to read.
Yes, so it's a long one. But and I just saw somebody tweet about this. It's like, oh, if you don't address this one particular thing in this blog post, then you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. But it's still super relevant today, and it actually talks a lot about how these evolution worked. And there was like a million ways to include code into your code base, like into your JavaScript code, especially because like the browser would do it differently than Node.js would do it. Because in the browser, you would have HTML that would just pull in all the script codes. But like, how do you do that in like Node.js? And that's actually a super interesting thing, because Dino is kind of trying to like balance the two. And they actually are trying to be super browser compatible, which has been kind of this, like there's this chasm in the JavaScript community with Node.js being very different from very, very different for a lot of use cases. And there's a ton of tooling of all around browserify and all that, like bring Node.js code to the browser and like do
Yeah.
it the other way around. Like there's this long discussion how to like put fetch into Node.js, and it's like proper, not just like a
Yeah.
library, and it's like
Right.
amazing.
Fascinating.
So yeah, here's another relic that we are still trying to replace. Like require.js was basically that. It's like
Yeah.
JavaScript call that pulls in some JavaScript code and like
Right.
makes it available to you.
But
And the
modules are a thing now, right? Like I thought
module,
they not done.
yeah,
What's the state of modules? Okay.
yeah. So JavaScript modules is trying to replace this. There is a specification. Again, like just because you have a specification, that
Right.
doesn't mean things. And that Node.js adopting JavaScript modules
Hmm.
and the npm ecosystem, the packaging ecosystem, like the library ecosystem adopting
Right. I
like
see.
this
I see.
modules is just it's just taking a lot of time and a lot of
Yeah.
transition. Some packages just like need to die, like unmaintained packages that
Yeah.
they just need to die out
Right.
because like they're never going to be updated. So
Yeah.
and so you always and so Miles Barnes and a bunch of people over at on Node.js worked their butts off to kind of bring Node.js into agreement onto what's spec'd and
Right.
implemented by browsers. So this is all implemented by browsers on today.
Hmm.
And the latest version of Node.js, 14, I believe, is actually so all like the past like 5 versions of Node.js ever since like 10 have
Yeah.
supported ways of enabling module support, but
Right.
like it took them so long until they actually managed to finally get to a point
Yeah.
when the old system and the new system could interoperate and people could opt in, like getting it to a point when they're like, okay, we can release this
Hmm.
as LTS version like to everybody because we are confident it's not going to break.
Yeah.
Took a long time. And so that's kind of what's happening right now. It's still
Yeah.
gonna take a bit of time, like for the whole ecosystem to shift over. But
Right.
that is if you have a chance to try it because you're using tooling and just generating fallbacks, like there are a lot of tools that you can just use it and then like generate all the fallback codes that you need for various systems. And if you have a chance to do that, like it actually like makes things like super nice, like
Hmm.
compared to all these like ancient libraries in all browsers.
Yeah. 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 It's equally. I just looked. Require.js hasn't had like it's had a doc update in the last 2 years, but it hasn't had a code update in a couple of years.
Yeah,
Years.
which is like it's kind of being superseded.
Yeah,
So
for
people
sure.
hasn't. There is also a big shift in the
There's
ecosystem, I would say.
jQuery in this.
Oh yeah, I will tell
I
you.
also like that you put a comment saying like, "Hey, this is the type of JavaScript I'm using in this particular thing."
Fun
Like,
fact, by the way, it doesn't have jQuery. I'll have something on this, but like, yeah,
yeah,
it's jQuery-ish
yeah,
JavaScript.
yeah,
No, this is super fun. This actually goes back. I have some cool stories on this,
yeah.
but just note, like the whole ecosystem actually moved on to like trying to require files on during runtime and it kind of
Right,
just building them like build steps over like kind of runtime or like requirements, and then that whole ecosystem have moved on from splitting out code and code splitting as a best practice when they realized that you can just ship somebody a 4 MB like JavaScript bundle, and then
right,
they're like use code splitting, which is basically an artifact of like it's so hard to include dynamically code into the browser. We just gotta package it all up. Oh no, we package it all up. It's so hard to actually like keep the bundle sizes low, so we can just split it up, and it's amazing.
right.
But yeah, so what happens here is it actually I'm polyfilling the jQuery dollar function
Okay.
with the inbuilt browser alternative, which is document query selector. Now
Right.
this is not great. This is definitely not something you should do today if you
Yeah.
actually wanted to polyfill jQuery. I've
Right.
been I've been super big on you might not need jQuery, and there is a
Right.
website that you might not need jQuery.com because that was also like this like tectonic shift in web development, moving away
Right.
from jQuery. It took so long, and one of the reasons is that people just got so used to it,
Yeah.
and
It
this
became
is
a sort
a
of include and everything.
No, absolutely. But this is a really good example of like,
Right.
jQuery popularized, selectors and like using selectors to manipulate code on your web page.
Right.
And so browsers were like, why would you need like 100 kilobytes of JavaScript for that? We can build this into the browser. And so they
Right.
did. And
Yeah.
so they implemented document query selector role. And
Yeah.
they're like, we're just gonna use like all the best practices that not just jQuery but all these libraries were doing,
Right.
like making these like selection easier, and like put it into the browser. And
Yeah.
then, but people would, and like the funny story I have about this is like the other thing that people use jQuery is for Ajax, which is
Yes.
probably
Yeah.
like,
Which
I
is,
don't know,
I
it's
think that's
like
the most famous. Yeah.
this
Like.
Ajax is probably like a word like floppy disks for
Right.
people who started like programming recently. It's like they know it's a thing and they know it does something, but like they have no clue why it's Ajax or why does it need to be Ajax.
Yeah.
But like basically like asynchronous calls within JavaScript was another big thing, and it was actually the method was actually called Ajax in jQuery, and people were using jQuery for a lot of this because it was just so hard and like cross-browser compatibility. And you in Internet Explorer you would have to use like a what is the extensions, the proprietary extensions that Internet Explorer, ActiveX control, like you would
Right.
have to instantiate an ActiveX control for like this kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
like people would just use the library. And
Right.
so the industry moved on, and the fetch API eventually emerged. The fetch API, it basically makes all these use cases easier, and it's
I was
also
literally sure I'm just googling Ajax versus Fetch.
yeah,
Throw that into the chat.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
basically based on Ajax, like
Right.
in the same way query selector is based on jQuery selectors. Like basically, hey, we can just put this into the browser. It's also
Right.
heavily used by service workers, so that's
Right.
kind of like a co-evolution there.
Yeah. And I
And
guess to
so
loop this back to some stuff we talked about earlier, one of the big differences between like Fetch and like the old way of doing things is like Fetch is built on promises, right? It's like a
oh
promise
yeah,
based library.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. That was the big thing. Is like, and like later on, jQuery implemented promises support, and their
Right.
promises support were wobbly and like a bit different. And like, again, it just like took a long years for the whole ecosystem to shift. So this is still a couple years ago. I'm working for a Hungarian like agency, I guess you
Yeah.
could call it, like a web development agency, and we had a big project for the public transport company in
Right.
Hungary, in Budapest. And we made this web page, and I was like, I convinced the team. I wasn't leading the front end build, but I was like leading the JavaScript part of the front end build, and I convinced our team lead that we can avoid using jQuery in this. It's 2014. We should be able to not use jQuery. And sure enough, like we did some polyfills we included for old browsers and this and
Yeah.
that. But it and like and basically you use fetch APIs to pull in like JSON and like dynamic stuff. And so we sent off the front end build, and 2 weeks later we got like a 40 like item list of like change requests. The last of which the implementation team, the team is who's implementing the front end, is not finding jQuery in this build, and like, can you point us to where is the jQuery in this build? We didn't,
Oh, no.
and we were like, yes, there is no jQuery, and apparently they ended up like just throwing like
Just adding it
scrapping
in.
off jQuery, like because they needed some plugin or something that the local team like,
Yeah.
and they were like, where is jQuery in here? Like,
Yeah.
I feel so
Which, to be
lost
honest, is
without
like,
jQuery.
I actually feel like that's like a super poignant problem now. Like I often feel when I like sit down to use some new web technology or something, I end up getting so off track with like installing other components because they rely on that ecosystem, and I end up with like never actually getting to the thing because I have a million ecosystems to cross through before I get to write any code. So even now, I feel that's
this is today. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so I want to. So you just keep seeing people talk about like, like Redux, and you're like, okay, okay, I'm gonna use. So I guess state management is a good thing. So I'm gonna use Redux in my code. So why do I use Redux? And they're like, okay, so are you using React or Vue.js or Preact or like because then you have to use one of these like connectors to the
Yeah.
framework you're using, and you're like, okay, so now you have to use a
Yeah.
framework, and like,
And then you end up having to use their build pipeline and like, oh, God,
oh, absolutely. I was
reference.
for a new project that we are working on.
Yeah.
I wanted to use GraphQL because our CMS already uses like an Apollo server. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna use like GraphQL and subscriptions. So this is like GraphQL seems to be a new kid on the block. So
Right.
we have talked about Ajax.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of. Ajax has primarily been born in using REST APIs, which are like these APIs that you hit, and then you get some information using a GET
Right.
request or post
Yeah.
some information to update something. And GraphQL also coming out of like the whole Facebook React ecosystem, but it's now its own standard with a lot of
Yeah.
implementers. Is like kind of making these like connected data like easier to
Mm.
query on the client side. And so we were like, oh, we are already using a GraphQL server, and like instead of like doing like a WebSocket based like subscription, so we can get live information change between the website and the
Yeah.
browser, we can just use GraphQL subscriptions, which basically implements this kind of, please let me know when this data changes. And your
Right.
JavaScript would get like on the client side would get like an update, is, hey, this data changed, so you can fetch the new information. And so I was like, okay, so I want to use subscriptions. And then I was like, okay, which server you are using, which client
Yeah.
side framework you are using, because depending on that, you have all these like various in stages of various completeness, like all these
Right.
like different libraries that are connectors to graph.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I can't
So
totally
kind
get
of connected to this, and I don't know if there is a positive answer to this question, but one of our chatters asked, so
it.
in that
Mhm.
situation you found yourselves in, how can I avoid using jQuery when the other plugin I want to use is dependent on jQuery? And I don't, like, you'd have to do a lot of polyfill, and like to an extent where you may as well just use jQuery, I guess.
Fun fact, I was like this super hardcore like anti jQuery person, and like
Yeah.
and then I got invited to I don't know what it was. That was I think it was a jQuery conference or
Yeah.
something of that sort.
Some jQuery
Uh,
replicating conference.
yeah. So a fun fact, like jQuery used to run conferences, and then they renamed their conference at some point. So it
Right.
wasn't jQuery conference anymore. And so I got to meet a lot of jQuery people. Like there's a jQuery Foundation. Oh, that's a super deep rabbit hole. How like the jQuery Foundation and like all these other like JavaScript related foundations have kind of like merged throughout the years and like became like and united under the umbrella of like the
Yeah.
Linux Foundation. It's amazing. It's if you're into that, that is like a deep rabbit hole to go into. But back
Judging by
then,
your tweets, it was probably the jQuery Developer Summit in 2017.
oh yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, yeah. And so I went there, and I realized, people who use and create and develop jQuery and maintain jQuery are people. And so
Right.
I was like this rabbit, you shouldn't use jQuery. And I was like, oh, these are nice people actually.
Right.
And so and then I realized stuff that, new jQuery is actually like very different from like prehistoric jQuery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they had like configurators that you can disable parts
Mm.
of jQuery and build like, like stripped down
Available. Yeah.
version. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is totally possible
Yeah.
to not just pull in whatever the full version of jQuery, but like you would
Right.
go into this configurator and like you would just pull in that like the core of jQuery,
Yeah.
and like test if your plugin works that way. Not
Right.
then check out the error message, try to tweak the included packages. Maybe it needs like it depends on something else, a function call from another part of jQuery. And it's totally possible to like strip down to like there's I don't know if it's today, and like Web Components is trying to change that this like being able to include code into your user interface. But like a lot of UI elements, like especially like jQuery UI, but also a lot of UI elements, like just a couple years ago and probably even today, would like rely on jQuery, like
Right.
a calendar picker, which again, browsers are like, why do we still have to include like 100 kilobytes of JavaScript into a browser
We
to
should
pick
when
like a
there's like these
date?
primitives that should be in
Yeah,
just like available in the UI, right? Yeah.
So that became also a thing now. So now we have like UI pickers and like date pickers and time pickers
Yeah.
and like built-in form elements and stuff like that. But that
Right.
was kind of the same idea. It's like, like I want to use this super full feature calendar picker, but like it needs jQuery. So
Yeah.
what
Yeah. Yeah.
what can I do?
Fascinating. God, we went on such a wild ride from one line of code. This is
Yeah,
great.
I mean, honestly, like I don't even know. I mean,
Yeah.
UI dot display dialog. What is UI here?
God.
uh Failure, prototype fail. Ooh, this is
I
using.
feel like it's been a really long time since I've seen just stuff thrown on the prototype method as well, or prototype
Oh
object.
wow, yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was a
Oh, there we
really.
go. Var UI.
Oh wow, you okay? That explains it. Wait, oh, but I guess that's. So this is something I wouldn't do today.
Right.
So this is a super tricky thing, and most of you don't even have to care about this because you just use let and const. And this is I've been tweeting. I think even about like in connection to this is that like no, like basically nobody has to know today what variable hoisting is in JavaScript. You
Yes.
you all really don't have to because
Yeah.
you don't have to deal with
They
this.
fix scopes in another way.
Yeah. But so if you will indulge me, oh, this is
Please
also like
do.
this will
I remember
actually
learning about variable hoisting, and actually, now you've mentioned that, I've never thought about the fact like I
this
spent so long getting my head around variable hoisting.
whenever I see this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
it's like this is super prone to. This actually goes back to another issue. Oh, I
Right.
have ESLint configured, so that's great.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the
It
119 errors that
yeah
I'm currently seeing.
yeah. I guess it doesn't detect all the browser, so it's not
Right.
set correctly to the browser environment. So it's complaining
Sure.
about document and window and stuff like this. But
Got you.
this is something like this is an object, right? So
Right.
it starts an object. An object definition starts here.
Mm.
And let me just talk about this a bit and
Yeah.
so we actually talk about code, not just me reminiscing about like past technologies, I guess. So this is something I wouldn't do, especially like you don't have to deal with automatic semicolon insertion
Right.
because you are using like a prettier or something like that that just like makes all your code formatting issues go away if
Mm.
you are using prettier, because ASI's automatic semicolon insertion is still going to bite you in the ass. This is a thing that I try to avoid these days because it's tricky to get right. The funny thing about this, and this is if you ever take away, if you're a JavaScript developer, ever take away, and you ever marveled what's happening here, imagine you have a function,
Mm.
and inside it you just say return object, return property value. So basically, what you mean here is like, hey, I want to return a new object from this function call that has a property that is set to value.
Mhm, mhm.
And you're like, oh, but I actually want to return another property. So I'm this looks bad, so I'm just gonna like move it all up and this. Oh, what is going on there? Hmm? Unexpected. Oh, what?
Is this
Wait, maybe I'm in a wrong place.
you're in app.js, aren't you?
That
Oh, I see what you're inside.
no, that's
Just
weird.
ESLint interacting badly with a project from 2013.
I would. Oh, but I'm stupid because I didn't give it a name. Function hello.
Oh,
Jesus. Uh,
or not.
or not. I'm not. Like this is me unearthing
Oh, now,
myself.
okay, no, that's good. Now it's saying it's defined but never used, which is
Oh.
fine. Yeah, that's a good.
Oh,
That's
okay,
good.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's
So
okay.
there we go.
Yeah. We're just
And
forgetting how to define functions live. It's fine.
no. So
We're professionals.
no, what I was gonna get into is that is problematic for
Right.
for a variety of ways because this doesn't do what you expect it to like what you expect it to, and so because what happens here?
Yeah.
I think. Let's see. Uh, well, let's just have to. This is really. I have to run this to actually show this, but for that,
Oh,
I need
sure.
a console. So maybe I'll show this like after the break or something when I
Sure.
figured
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
how to
Yeah.
run a console here, or
Yeah.
like open like something like a.
Should we take a quick break now and set it up? I can go
No,
set
no,
it
no,
up
no.
and you
That's all
can
right.
go.
No,
Alright, cool.
but I was just gonna show.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting takeaway from
Yeah.
how ultimately semicolon insertion. That is like
Yeah.
a thing that was specified in the early, like the original JavaScript specification, like 25 years ago, and you're like, but like I don't have to care about that, and you actually have to. Like, it's going to weirdly break your code at some point, and you're just like, wait, what's happening? But what I was gonna say here is actually there is a lot of that change. Where were we actually? We were super up in the code.
var UI.
Yeah, something like UI something. Shuffle.
Oh, there is. Up a little bit. Perfect.
Oh yes, this one.
Line
Yeah.
104. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That. And so there been so you wouldn't do this today because you would just use lat or const. And the problem with this is this operates a bit weirdly because this is a variable assignment. So if you would just declare a function like I did, like function foo, and like you just have a function here and you use it like up and top, you're gonna see that it works. The reason is that because the function is getting hoisted. Oh, sorry for scrolling around all that.
Oh, it's all good.
Wait.
You're in a different file now. You're in
required. I was like, what just happened? I was like, so I was like, I'm not finding this. So you could just use this before calling this function because the function declaration gets hoisted, which means that JavaScript goes through your function and parses all the functions and makes it available at the very top of the file. But and you would think that because you would be told that var declarations are also hoisted, and they're like, cool, so I could just do this as well, and I could use UI up on top in this file. But you would be mistaken because var UI, the definition of the variable is hoisted, so the browser will know var UI exists, but it doesn't get a value assigned until you actually run this line of code. So if you actually would try to use UI, it would be undefined. So that's like a big food gun. So if you only use this variable asynchronously, like it's still gonna work, which is probably what I'm doing here, is like I use it internally in some callback function that only runs when this whole file has executed. So that's not an issue because it already has a value. But it's still kind of like misleading. Like it would lead people to think that this could happen. Again, this problem also doesn't happen with const or let because they are not defined above this point. So and most people are not like there's no real reason for anyone to use var anymore. Like I don't think like I wonder if any I don't think
being incredibly lazy.
I mean there's if you know
there are definitely times where I'm like I want this thing at the top. I want it to always be available. I never want to think about it. I'm hacking. I'll get back to doing this properly later.
No,
thing.
I mean, honestly, from just an accessibility point of view, like just using var for a variable, it's just like for somebody who doesn't do any coding, like, and like wanting to not have to explain to them what is the difference in let and const, especially,
what if you a natural keyword, right? Like let is like kind of an arcane way of referring to that.
And like especially like if you have to explain the difference and you're like, there's this const which is like constant, but it's not actually constant because it's just a constant reference, and like all of that stuff. It's just like you're like, there's a variable called UI, and then you can move on and then they can learn about it. So that I can see that as an accessibility reason maybe, but like that's pretty much it. And like so this is an object definition that you can also there's so many ways to do this. Like you can create a new class, even like objects now. So you see, I'm saying set title function title.
Into a function,
So which basically is a method or like a function call. So this can be totally like shortened down to just set title, and like the browser will the browser will know exactly what's
Because
going
now
on.
we have getters and setters at the
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And yeah, it's like it's called the proper method definition syntax or something
Okay.
like that. But like, yeah, that's pretty much what it means. Is like, instead of like using the long, it's a method definition shorthand, maybe something like that.
I'll find it.
But that was a bunch of improvements to like object definitions that make it like basically easier to use them in the modern ways that we
Yeah.
are using them. So that's one of them. Or you could just use an arrow function if you know the caveats. If
Yeah.
you don't want to use the this value, like the this value, you don't really have to deal with today. So there's like a lot of stuff, like people complaining, oh, how can somebody just out of a boot camp, like 3 months of like JavaScript tutoring and
Yeah.
like be a useful web developer? And you're like, because they don't have to know all this gunk.
Right.
Somebody with 10 years of experience has a lot of useful experience, but also a lot of useless
Yeah.
experience
A lot of
that
stuff that has like
you
gone out of
absolutely
fashion and
don't
gone out of
need.
standard, and yeah.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. God, it's fascinating. Cool. So we are nearing the end of our time. So let's take a break so we can bring out the fun stuff and I can top up my water. So
All
we will
right.
be back in just a minute, folks.
Yeah,
In the
and
meantime, I will leave you with some love music. Sorry, Flaki, what were you going to say?
yeah, no, just please share any questions, or like if
Yeah.
there's anything you want us to like take on after like the break, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just drop some questions in there, or like topics or whatever.
Cool. We'll be back
All right.
very shortly. Let me throw up the Bureau back screen and then leave you with some lovely Unz Unz music. Hello, everyone. So we are back, and I believe Flaki is going to add his phone to the stream. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. So Flaki's going to add his phone, give us a tour.
Now I'm happy. I cleaned the bed up.
That's why I always say when people are like, "Why do you have this ridiculous green screen of a canal?" I'm like, "Because you don't want to see the room I'm in." It's I do have a lovely shelf of scented candles going there. So yeah, thank you for hanging out while we went to the break. Flaki has prepared some hardware for us to take a look at. We spoke earlier in the show about JavaScript-powered hardware, and I've never been at an event and not seen Flaki towing some JavaScript-powered hardware. So we're going to give that a go. Cool. So while he's getting set up, just a couple of reminders. You can jump in with questions anytime in the chat. If you want to post a link, that's very welcome. Just give me a warning. This is the first of 3 shows today. We have some other shows coming up that you can find on our schedule.
Mic check. Okay.
Is it working?
Sorry.
All good.
Should have muted.
Cool. I can mute you here. Is this? No, that's checking Fox. That's the other screen. This is a new one for us. We've got, I think Flaki's got like 4 different devices in our streaming platform at the moment. Yeah, so if you want to check what's coming up later on. Oh, there it is. Is that ready to go? Shall I add it and mute this one? Cool. Okay. We are now on Flaki Tourcam. With a little bit of echo, but I think it's fine.
Oh, why did it not connect? Wait. There we go. 1, 2, mic check.
The mic's not great, so maybe I'll add your other one and mute the mic on this one. There we go. Let's try this.
I think I have to.
And then we can put this as solo layout.
Oh no! Wait, Mike.
Get a lovely view of Flaki's bin there.
Jesus.
Let me remove that one for a moment. There we go.
Oh, Nike. Oh, okay. So.
Okay, is it ready to be added?
And Yes.
Perfect. And I'll put it on solo layout. There we go.
All right, there we go.
Perfect.
So,
lovely keyboard.
Oh, you can also see my setup. Oh,
it's so much tidier than what I've got going on over here right now.
Yeah. Now, 1, 2.
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. I
should mute my. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, cool. I swapped you over to your phone mic.
Yeah. So yeah, you could see my my setup, but yeah. So Laka wanted to see the plushies. So that's the wait. No focus. There we go. Yeah. So cool. The problem is I have way too much plushies. But you're also gonna see my green screen because when I move into my new apartment, like this is what I got left with. This is like this wardrobe is amazing. Everybody is freaking out about it, but like it doesn't go anywhere, and it's full of like mirrors, which is like not the best thing when you have like yeah. So there are the plushies. There are more of the plushies. There are more of the plushies, and then you have my focus. So I hope you're happy, Alex.
But no, still here. Oh my god, the amount of foxes! Nice.
Yeah, but I did collect you. So I actually managed to swoop up some of the Firefox OS funds that I was mentioning earlier, and I actually had a look at and unearthed my tiny gadgets bin. This is the basically like the most interesting part of this is like whatever you see. Let's say here.
Yeah.
So this device is the same as this device. So as you would see, this is like a tiny like microcontroller kind of thing. Let me see.
Yeah.
Get you a bit more light. And so at the end of the day, it's basically this device, which is like an Arduino connected to a screen and some buttons, which is basically practically this device, which is again like an Arduino. Connected to a screen and like some audio, like a buzzer.
Someone threw in the chat that it's an ArduBoy. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That the name of this device is an ArduBoy. But like so their shtick is basically is to like hook up this like very cheap and very basic like Arduino controller into some buttons and screens and let people play around with it, create games for it. So let me see if I can turn one of these on. And not this one.
It's like the battery checks now.
Battery, yeah. Oh, this one
yay!
works. Oh, this is actually one of the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is
The dinosaur
I think you will recognize it. Yeah, so this is basically that's yeah. So that's basically I wrote this game initially in like Arduino, like C++ using the Arduino builder, and then I was like, okay, but like this is tough, and like I want to be able to create better. So I started working on like just a tool that makes it possible to draw some of these pixel art and like export it directly to Arduino code. And once I was there, it was like, you would draw in a canvas on the web page, and then it would export all the codes that you need to put into your like C++ code. I was like, wait a second, can I like translate in the same way like JavaScript into like C++ code? And there's like I had some successes there, let's just say. So it kind of worked. And yeah, so that was the flow thing I was mentioning. It's like just kind of figuring out how to compile
get those types in JavaScript.
Yeah, but like you see a bunch of other ones here. So these are also Arduino ones. These are more powerful. So these ones have a ARM processor built in. Let me see if I can actually get this working. These folks are super cool as well. That they get us so much hardware like to run like wacky workshops like and like stuff like that. That's not.
I love that it's a little arcade cabinet. That's very cool.
Yeah, so that's a tiny arcade, by the way, if anybody cares. But they're also not charged, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. And so there are all kinds of like this hardware that I was like, these are so amazing, and it would be so cool to like create like software for it. But it's just so complicated to get, like especially like these are color ones. So like getting like stuff on a color screen is even harder. And so all of this stuff is basically, like how could we give like the same power to people how like Tesla gave me like a couple years ago. So that was kind of like the ideal. Let me just settle back on my seat and.
Cool.
And so, I also wait. So I got you the key on. And so
I recognize that.
I plugged it in because it was totally depleted. But let's see if I can turn it. Oh,
nice.
Look at that! So welcome to Firefox OS. The year is 2014.
Amazing.
And you swipe to open the home screen of a phone.
God,
wait! Can this?
You've got your app. You've got your app.
Well.
Oh my God! Is it gonna work? So this is for folks who this is the app that we were looking at that Flaki was walking us through earlier. The check-in
that's
app,
gonna break.
Oh.
What is that? So it says, check-in Fox is an operating system, and you can log into Foursquare. Actually, it works. I mean, I'm not gonna be.
This repo hasn't been updated for 7 years, and like you just booted up a phone, and it requires internet connection. That makes sense.
Yeah. So So this is the thing, is that it is actually using OAuth because that's how you like kind of authenticate into the Foursquare API, and that doesn't work because that actually needs a backend here, and so that backend was hosted on the Red Hat Cloud, which is like the 10-year ago version of like the cloud services, like like they moved that to like they renamed that to OpenShift and like a bunch of other stuff. So but it launches at least.
It launches and it worked. That was awesome. Thank you so much for showing us that. That's super cool. Try add back in your other cam. There we go. We're back. Let me unmute you here. There we go. We should be able to hear you again. Cool. You back? You shut up.
Again?
There we go. Awesome. Cool. Well, that was.
Okay, let me just connect my headset.
No, it's all good. But yeah, you're now going to go through all this effort of setting up your headset, and we're at the end of time anyway. So yeah, that was so fun and super
I actually need
awesome.
to do that, please.
Thank you for walking us through that code and for sharing so many kind of like where were we then, where are we now stories. That was exactly what I wanted out of this. That was super great, and it was great to be able to like round that off with not only seeing some super cool and I hope inspiring Arduino devices. I think I'm gonna pick up an Arduboy because I've got the what's it called, the pocket chip, which is now like dead and discontinued essentially.
Oh yeah.
So the Arduboy looks like a good.
I have it somewhere here. I found it. I've found that one as well.
Yeah.
Like as I was
So yeah.
moving shit. All right. Yeah. Yeah, that's super funky because that's like a proper
and it
Linux
uses
machine for you. Like people
the games can be written in Lua, which is nice. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool. And yeah, it was nice to be able to end with seeing the Firefox OS phone and seeing it running. That's fantastic.
Well, I actually didn't know. Like this was completely even a surprise to me that I still had it on there. I was like, wow, okay.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Flaki, for your time. We have to wrap up. So if people want to find you or these projects on the internet, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I mean, like if you go onto my GitHub page, which is like github.com/Flaki, please be warned that you will find all these like half-ready projects. I guess I haven't really like touched on what I'm doing these days. So
we've got time for that. Let's go for it.
Yeah, no, but like that's pretty much like that's where I want you to find me.
Yeah.
By the way, Flak.is is all my contacts. If you're let me just put that. Yeah. So on my GitHub page and everything is all in there. So I'm trying. I'm coming off of Twitter. Like I'm trying hard. Yeah, but yeah. So ever since like I used to travel a ton for conferences. And then in the spring, I used to do a lot of like online conferences, and I was like really disappointed that they were like not really how I really wanted. Like there was so much potential in like online events, and like I didn't know any of these conferences like get there at all. There are some things that are coming along. Like there was a great conference called Roguelike Celebration just a couple days ago. They developed a completely like a game for the UI and the social space for the conference. It's completely unhinged. It was amazing, and so these are the kind of things that I kind of wanted to have online events instead of like here's a live stream. We are streaming in like San Francisco hours.
Basically running a conference, but just on Twitch rather than adapting for the online format and making use of what we have.
Yeah, and like kind of like just figure out like different ways to do this. Like online formats have so different like constraints than like an in-person format, and also like people are very they attend these conferences very differently. So you have a baby crying. There's not the whole I'm gonna go on a flight. I'm gonna go into a hotel. I'm gonna get up the next day.
My life conference is just the conference.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly. So there's not that the experience has changed. So. So I kind of wanted to like kind of follow up with that, and so we are running a RustFest, an event called RustFest, a Rust conference. It's basically a conference on the Rust programming language, and we were gonna run an in-person event this year, which of course didn't happen. And we are like, if we're gonna run an online event, we're gonna make it live up to these expectations. And so we only have like I can drop the.
Is this RustFest Global?
Yes, so it's called RustFest Global, and so our new website is going live next week, and we are developing our own streaming service or streaming framework, which is basically I'm going to open source this after the conference to help like other people like build custom experiences for their events. So a lot of the limitations that are possible in online events these days are, there are a X number of tools that let you do things in X number of ways, whether that's Twitch or YouTube or like some platform that is for a conference. But like, what if you actually wanted to do your own like thing? And like, and this is exactly like roguelike celebration. And
Platform,
no, they ended up building their own social platform, but they still stream to YouTube and Twitch because they were like, just getting that right is like super hard. So kind of like help you with that part. And so that is so I wanted to mention that because that is going to happen. I'm spending a lot of time these days in like open source governance and stuff. And so we have an Estonian nonprofit, and I'm working really hard. But one of the reasons why it's not open source right now is because I kind of want to get it right and like kind of want to set it up as a proper like open source project with governance. And so
and have the code live under the right organization.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. So that's kind of what we have a nonprofit that's kind of we created for this. It's like not just help people. We use Open Collective and a bunch of other ways to, you know, support the sustainability of like projects like open source projects. But the problem is I see so many like Open Collective projects that have money but no like maintenance, because like the people who would be interested in contributing, there's no governments on how to handle that. The people who created a project are not like, they don't have the time. I mean, look around what's happening. That's understandable. And so that's kind of like to help projects like create sustainable projects, not just like getting funding, but also like setting up your project in a way that, you know, will carry its own weight. And so that's kind of what I want with this code.
I know you're in the process of creating it. Is this online? Does this nonprofit have a web presence?
Yeah, I guess like you could do the name of the nonprofit is Bay Area Tech Club, and that actually comes from a conversation. Just a silly idea. I was like, oh, we should name it something like Bay Area because we are in Tallinn. There's a literal bay next to my window. So
it's also like going to be great for picking up some good SEO.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, finding a good web, finding a good untaken web domain and all that was tricky. But yeah, so we should be like tweeting more about that on both, you know, the Rustfest like site and the Bay Area Tech Club. But that's kind of, you know, if you all if you're actually interested in this space, I don't know if anybody is watching that, you know, is like sustainable and open source governance. Like I have a bunch of people lined up to talk about this like in detail like later this month to get this right. But yeah, if any of you are into that kind of stuff, especially reach out, because I'm really happy to hear how other people have been dealing with this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for showing that. I've put their Twitter is down below on their website. You can also find various ways of contacting. I'll throw that up quickly as well. Okay, so if you have interest or experience in open source governance, reach out to Bay Area Tech Club. They'd love to chat to you. Awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much, Flaki. This has been so much fun, and I hope it's been good for you as well, viewers. I have to do that awkward shuffle now while I have to wrap things up, so I have to boot you backstage. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Awesome. Thank you again, Flaki. I hope that was useful and fun to everyone watching. It was certainly useful and fun to me. And as I wrote a Firefox OS app at like some hackathon in London in 2014, which is where I got my Firefox OS phone. And yeah, it's wild, that point that Flaki made about like people coming out of boot camps now, like, yeah, they're short periods of time, but just how much of the JavaScript that I learned when I was doing a lot of JavaScript is now like completely irrelevant. Super interesting. So thank you again, Flaki. Thank you all for watching. What do we have coming for the rest of the day? There are 2 more shows today. You can find where those are at twitch.tv RaiseDev's schedule. Let me give you our schedule spoiler for the episode. Next up, we have Cy Brand. Cy is a developer advocate at Microsoft working on C++ in particular. I have a wealth of things I want to chat to Cy about. We're going to hear a little bit about what that role is like, what being a developer advocate on a language like C++ is like. I also want to ask them about a couple of their projects, particularly Code Art Journal. We'll see where we get with that. So Cy Brand will be up in about 1.5 hours. We went really long with Flaki. That's awesome. 1.5 hours is when Cy will be on. It's a very C-heavy day today. Not only do we have Cy later on at the 10 p.m. Central European Time show and the 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time show, we have Shana Matthews, who will be coming on to talk to us about C as well. We're going to be doing another one of these like old code deep dives into some old C code that Shana wrote, and we're going to be looking at how Shana would do that a little bit differently today. So that's going to be super fun as well. So that's the shows for today. Up on the schedule site right now is also the shows that are happening next week. Sorry, the shows that are happening Friday, not the ones that are happening next week. The shows that are happening Friday, we've got Rain Leander tomorrow from Packet Host. We've got Ender Phelan from Red Hat, and we've got Chris Hunt, a developer in Colorado. And we're going to be doing some really fun things with them as well. I believe I can actually tell you what we're going to be doing with them. So with Rain, we are going to be looking at a really cool project from Packet Host where they have made a repository of standards for external facing repositories. So if you're like at a company and you're trying to open source some stuff and you want to know what needs to be in your repository to make it open and public facing to the world, Packet Host are trying to set those standards, and Rain is working on that. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about Rain's developer journey and how they got into tech. With Ender, we are going to, sorry, this is me going through emails. With Ender, we are doing a maintainer show and tell on Ender's project GraphBack. GraphBack is a GraphQL server and client that aims to be out of the box, batteries included, really easy to use. So Flaki touched on Flaki touched on GraphQL a little bit today. So if you're interested in hearing more about GraphQL, that will be tomorrow on the 4 p.m. European show. And then we're finishing up with Chris Hunt, and Chris, I do believe, is bringing us some old code. What is Chris bringing us? Chris, okay, we've got a couple of things that I'm going with Chris. We might be doing another old code dive, which we're calling Git Blame, by the way. That's the name of looking at our old code and feeling ashamed but also happy about it is Git Blame. He may also be showing us a project that he works on and kind of explaining how that code works to us and walking us through it step by step. So when that is confirmed, I'll let you know here on the show. So that's everything for the show. Final reminders, if you have a question that you want help with this Hacktoberfest, you can get that answered. No, Flaki, it's Ender Phelan. He is at Red Hat. I'll drop his name here. It's Ender Phelan, and he is up tomorrow. Yeah, so reminder, if you want, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation as well because it's an Irish name, and as my good friend Hugh tells me every time I try to pronounce anything Irish, I really make a mess of it. So apologies to Ender if I have made a mess of that. So if you have a question or anything, we can help you with this Hacktoberfest. That is what we're here for. We're doing all these kind of like side fun things and going around these topics because whilst we're in between questions, we're trying to make sure we cover other things that are of interest and are maybe useful in your Hacktoberfest journey. But when we do get questions and where we get questions, we will take time to answer them on the show. I spent almost all of Monday answering viewers' questions about finding good C++ and Go projects. So if you have any questions, you can submit them to race.dev Hacktoberfest. If you need more help in submitting your questions and you want to see how that process works, there's a video in our highlights which walks through submitting questions, so you can find that and find out how to submit questions and how we answer those questions for you. So check out our highlights or go to race.dev Hacktoberfest. And then finally, race.dev, why are we doing this? We care passionately about helping you as a developer, whether that's early stage or late stage, now trying to go for a change, get where you want to be in your career. Race.dev is a service to get you the experience you need to level up your developer career with help from expert coaches. We'll match you with one of our wonderful coaches who will work with you on your goals and your plan for getting to those goals, and then we'll sit with you, and whether that's pair programming or like conversational advice, whatever it is, we'll help you work towards those goals. We've got some lovely coaches with all kinds of really interesting experiences. We had a bunch of new coaches join on Monday. We're adding new coaches because lots of people have signed up for the service. We're trying to get you all matched with coaches as soon as possible. So you can sign up for that at raise.dev if you're interested. So that's all from me. See you in an hour and a half if you join us for the next show with Cy Brand. Otherwise, hope you have a wonderful day and we see you sometime else soon. Let me cue up the music to see myself out. Farewell. See you in a couple of hours.